A.
At some of the issues of the day, joining me live is National Senator Bridget McKenzie. Senator, thank you for your time this morning.
Great to be with you, Danica.
Firstly, let's begin with the New South Wales-Victorian border situation. Yesterday, the Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews confirmed that he has been speaking with Gladys Berejiklian in terms of a movement bubble. What would you like to see this look like? Because there's a number of farmers really struggling.
There really is, Danica. The National Party MPs and senators in New South Wales and Victoria have been fighting this for a very, very long time. This has been going on for over a month. We've seen these restrictions along our border between New South Wales and Victoria, a border that delivers over $35 billion annually to the gross state product of both those states. And we're seeing horrific outcomes for not just farmers but workers on both sides of the border with very little medical criteria or evidence to back up the closure of these borders. So what we're sort of seeing as the regulations stand now, if you're a farmer that lives, and we've got lots of examples coming into my office of primary producers who own properties on both sides of the border, this is quite a usual practice, they will have to head down from COVID-free northeast Victoria to COVID hotspot Melbourne, fly to Sydney with their dogs and all their gear, and then drive back down to COVID-free New South Wales. It is absolutely nonsensical, and both the state government has to have a common sense approach so that we can keep our national food supply chain going and our primary producers can do what they need to do and produce food. From my interactions and discussions with those involved, there are also two key areas of misunderstanding in Macquarie Street. They are the breadth of the type of jobs that are required in the agricultural supply chain. It's not just fruit pickers or shearers. We're needing diesel mechanics, we're needing contractors, etc., over 120 different occupation settings. But also there's a misunderstanding of the availability within our local communities of that workforce. So we need not a city-centric approach to dealing with this problem, but one that actually reflects the reality here on the ground.
And also, aside from the agricultural chains, I mean, I've spoken to a number of people around Kundruk, Barham, on the border of Victoria and New South Wales. A number of people can't go to work, they're out of jobs, they've been through drought, pandemic and now border closures. Are you worried about the future of a number of these small towns? They've had no cases of COVID-19 and now they're struggling to survive.
Danica, you've articulated it beautifully. We've been on this case for over a month now, ever since the hotspots were identified in Melbourne mid-June, that we needed to close Melbourne down hard so that we could continue to operate in the regions. We talk about protecting lives and livelihoods, and you're dead right. People are losing their livelihoods right now. Melburnians can get to work, no problem under stage 4. Sydney-siders can get to work. But those tens of thousands of Victorian and New South Welshmen that live along the most productive border in the country cannot get to jobs. They can't get to open their own businesses and therefore keep their employees employed. So there's actually a perverse impact on border communities as a result to these city-centric decisions being made.
Let's move on now to the situation in Victoria. Health authorities are confident that perhaps the numbers are stabilising. Do you think it's past its peak or still too early to say?
Well, I've always said, Danica, you've got to pay this virus an immense amount of respect. And the minute you get complacent as a state government, as a national government, or as indeed as an individual, you'll pay the price. We need to learn to live with this virus over the long term rather than this on and off closing off our economy. So I'm hopeful. Obviously, the numbers are all trending in the right direction. I guess for me as Leader of the Nationals in the Senate and someone that cares about the rural and regional communities, not just in Victoria but right across Australia, is the failure of our state Labor government to close Melbourne down. We've still got daily examples of cars being waved through on major highways, not even being checked if they have a reasonable and lawful reason for leaving stage 4 lockdown Melbourne, heading out into the regions to buy a puppy, get to their holiday house, buy a burger in Wodonga. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, and I think Daniel Andrews and the state Labor government needs to really take the health and wellbeing of COVID-free regional Victoria seriously so that we can recover very quickly once we do get this under control in Victoria.
Health authorities, though, Senator, appear to be quite confident that they are getting this under control and that the lockdown measures are working. But are you saying that that's not the case for regional New South Wales?
Well, as I said, the numbers here in Victoria seem to be trending in the right direction, obviously, over time, and the lockdown measures seem to be working in Melbourne. My concern, though, Danica, as I said, was that it should always be confined to Melbourne, and that Daniel Andrews needs to get tougher on restricting the movement of Melburnians from hotspots out into the regions where we've got very low numbers of COVID and no examples of community transmission outside of those large regional centres. I think the most perverse and devastating outcome would be that restrictions are lifted in Melbourne because of the great numbers, but border communities between New South Wales and Victoria and indeed Victoria and South Australia are still going through untold negative economic and social impacts because state premiers haven't got a clear pathway forward to lifting those restrictions. I'd like to see the premiers to actually have a plan of when are the numbers good enough to start lifting some of those border restrictions that are meaning people living in Wodonga, in Mildura, in Echuca Moama are experiencing tougher impacts than those people in Melbourne who can still get to work.
Senator Bridget McKenzie, appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thanks, Dan.